You're standing barefoot in a battlefield in Sparta. The battle was over, but something terrifying happened that will be unforgettable. The warrior was gone, but his wife remained, living proof of failure in a society that never forgot. No laws were announced, no sentence was spoken, yet her life was never the same again. Stay, and you'll discover how Sparta punished without violence, why silence became the cruelest tool of discipline, and how social erasure lasted longer than death itself. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. In ancient Sparta, defeat did not end on the battlefield, because for the Spartans, war was not merely a contest between armies. It was a test of worth, and failure carried consequences that extended far beyond the fallen warrior himself, reaching into the private lives of those left behind, particularly the women whose identities were inseparable from the honor of the men they married. And to understand why the fate of these women was considered unspeakable by later historians, one must first understand that Spartan society was not built on compassion, but on control, discipline, and public judgment. And within the system there was no concept of private grief, because grief that weakened resolve was considered dangerous to the state. And so the wives of defeated warriors found themselves trapped in a world that offered no refuge. No sympathy and no silence, only scrutiny, expectation, and the constant reminder that they now carried a mark they could never erase. Because in Sparta, honor was collective, and failure was contagious. And when a warrior fell in disgrace, that disgrace did not die with him. It lived on through his household, reshaping the social standing of his wife in ways that were never officially written down, yet universally understood. And these understandings governed daily life with ruthless consistency, because Spartan law did not need to spell out every punishment, as long as society enforced them through custom, ritual, and exclusion. And for the wives of defeated warriors, this enforcement was relentless, because their presence served as a reminder of what the state despised most: weakness, failure, and deviation from the ideal. And so rather than being mourned, they were watched, evaluated, and silently reassigned within the rigid hierarchy of Spartan womanhood, where status was not inherited permanently, but earned and maintained through association with success. And once that association was broken, the fall was immediate and irreversible, and this fall manifested not through violence, but through something far more devastating: erasure of dignity. Because Spartan women were expected to embody strength, pride, and resilience, but only when those traits reflected glory. And when defeat entered the narrative, those same women became symbols of inadequacy, tolerated but diminished, present but never equal again. And this transformation occurred quietly, without formal announcement, because in Sparta, the most effective punishments were those that required no spectacle, only collective agreement, and this agreement shaped everything from who was invited to gatherings, to who was spoken to with respect, to who was silently avoided. And this avoidance was not accidental, it was instructional, teaching others what happened when a household failed the state. And for the women living under this weight, the punishment was ongoing because it offered no resolution, no redemption, and no clear endpoint. Only a life lived under altered expectations, where every interaction reinforced the same message, that their worth had been recalculated, and could never return to its former value. And this recalculation extended into deeply personal aspects of life, because Spartan society regulated relationships with brutal efficiency, viewing marriage not as romance but as contribution to the state. And once a woman was associated with failure, her role within this system changed dramatically, because she was no longer seen as an asset but as a reminder, and reminders were inconvenient, and so she was often sidelined, repositioned socially in ways that stripped her of influence and visibility, while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. And this illusion is what makes the history so disturbing, because from the outside nothing appeared cruel: no chains, no exile, no dramatic punishment. Yet internally, the experience was one of constant diminishment, where identity narrowed, opportunity vanished, and life became defined by what could no longer be reclaimed, and the state benefited from this arrangement immensely, because it reinforced discipline without needing force, showing every household that failure would echo long after the battlefield grew quiet. And this lesson was absorbed deeply, shaping Spartan culture for generations because fear of post-defeat consequences proved more motivating than fear of death itself. And for the wives who lived within this system, the true horror was not a single act, but the permanence of the condition imposed upon them because there was no path back to honor once it was lost, only endurance, silence, and the knowledge that their lives now served as cautionary examples, not stories worth telling. And this is why later observers struggled to describe their fate using words like unspeakable. Not because it involved hidden violence, but because it involved something far more unsettling. A society that systematically erased the social existence of women without ever acknowledging that it was doing so. And as this story continues, the deeper mechanisms behind Sparta's treatment of these women become clearer, revealing how a culture obsessed with strength learned to weaponize shame, isolation, and identity itself, creating consequences that outlasted battles, victories, and even the warriors whose failures began the cycle. As time passed and the memory of the battlefield faded from public discussion, the consequences imposed on the wives of defeated warriors did not soften, because Spartan punishment was not designed to end. It was designed to settle in, becoming part of daily life so thoroughly that it felt indistinguishable from normality, and this normalization was deliberate. Because a punishment that feels ordinary is far more effective than one that shocks. And within Spartan society, the quiet reshaping of a woman's status served as a constant reminder of the values the state demanded, and the wives who carried this burden learned quickly that there would be no moment of reckoning, no formal judgment to endure and then move beyond, only a slow recalibration of how they were treated, perceived, and remembered. And this recalibration began with subtle shifts that outsiders might never notice, invitations that stopped arriving, conversations that ended when they approached, compliments replaced with silence, and respect replaced with polite distance. And while none of these acts were punishable or even acknowledged, together they formed a system of exclusion that was impossible to confront. Because there was no single offender, only collective behavior, and collective behavior cannot be challenged without risking further isolation, and this forced the women into a state of careful self-monitoring, where every action was weighed against the fear of confirming the judgment already placed upon them, because in Sparta, reputation was not personal, it was communal, and once the community decided who you were, contradiction became futile, and this reality shaped how these women moved through public spaces, how they spoke, how they dressed, and even how they expressed emotion, because Spartan ideals demanded visible strength, yet denied these women the social standing that made strength admirable, creating a contradiction they could never resolve, and this contradiction was deeply unsettling, because it required them to perform resilience without recognition, to embody values that no longer earned them respect, and over time, this performance became exhausting, because resilience without acknowledgement turns into endurance, and endurance without hope becomes resignation. And this psychological weight was compounded by the way Spartan society treated memory, because remembrance was selective, honoring victories and erasing failures, and the wives of defeated warriors existed in a liminal space where their husbands' names were spoken cautiously, if at all, and when they were mentioned, it was often as lessons rather than individuals. And this reframing transformed personal loss into public warning, stripping it of intimacy and replacing it with ideology, and for the women, this meant that even their private grief was never truly private, because it was always interpreted through the lens of state values. And grief that did not align with those values was discouraged, not through force, but through expectation, because Spartan culture prized emotional restraint as proof of loyalty, and any visible struggle risked being seen as weakness, further justifying the woman's diminished status, and so silence became a survival strategy, a way to exist without attracting additional scrutiny, and this silence extended into the home as well, because Spartan households were not sanctuaries from public life, but extensions of it, and the home offered little refuge from judgment, as neighbors, relatives, and even children absorbed the same values that shaped the broader society, reinforcing the same hierarchy through everyday interactions, and this meant that the wives of defeated warriors lived under constant observation, not because anyone watched them deliberately, but because Spartan society trained its citizens to notice deviation instinctively, and deviation was defined not by behavior alone, but by association, and association with failure was enough to mark someone permanently. And this marking followed them across years, even decades, because Spartan culture valued continuity, believing that lessons must endure to remain effective, and allowing redemption would weaken the message. And this refusal of redemption reveals the true purpose of the system, because it was never about justice or correction, but about deterrence. Ensuring that fear of long-term social consequences motivated warriors to fight relentlessly, knowing that their defeat would not end with them, but would echo through the lives of those they loved most. And this realization is what makes the fate of these women so disturbing, because they became instruments of discipline without consent. Their lives reshaped to serve as warnings, and yet their suffering was never officially acknowledged, because acknowledging it would imply that the system caused harm, and Sparta could not admit harm without undermining its own ideals. And so the narrative remained fixed, portraying these outcomes as natural, deserved, and necessary. And this narrative was powerful enough to persist even when individual circumstances varied, because ideology flattened experience into principle, and principle replaced empathy. And over time, the women themselves internalized aspects of this worldview, because constant exposure to judgment reshaped self-perception, and some began to view their altered status as inevitable rather than imposed, accepting diminished expectations as the cost of belonging to a society that offered no alternatives. And this internalization is one of the most effective forms of control, because it transforms external punishment into self-regulation, reducing the need for enforcement and allowing the system to function smoothly without overt cruelty. And from the outside, Spartan society continued to appear disciplined, unified, and resilient, admired by later cultures for its simplicity and strength, while the quieter costs of that strength remained largely invisible, carried by those whose lives were constrained not by law but by collective judgment. And as generations passed, these patterns repeated, reinforcing the same lesson with each conflict, that failure did not end with death, and that the consequences of defeat extended into the social fabric in ways that could not be undone. And this understanding shaped Spartan identity profoundly, embedding fear into loyalty and discipline into love. And for the wives who lived within this reality, the most unsettling aspect was not the loss of status itself, but the certainty that nothing they did could change it. Because the judgment they carried was not about them as individuals, but about what they represented. And representation, once fixed, leaves no room for redemption, only endurance. And as the story moves forward, this endurance becomes the key to understanding how Spartan society maintained its rigidity for so long, and why its legacy continues to disturb modern observers, because it demonstrates how a culture can normalize suffering without ever naming it, using honor as justification and silence as enforcement, leaving behind histories that feel unspeakable not because they are hidden, but because they are difficult to reconcile with the admiration Sparta has long received.